I would imagine along that way, the process kind of weeds out people who aren't willing to change their perspectives or add new information or take on the steep learning curve that I would imagine you found in your ultimate final investors who could buy into the dream that you're trying to put out there and to communicate this, and they weren't looking so much at it as, well, there has to be a business that's profitable, and the way you first structure the plan to try to get them to buy in. So tell me about the mindsets of people who were just, dismissive, and then the other people who ultimately came around to help you get the fruit.
Sure. Well, initially we went to family and friends to find that, and they believed in just because of family and friends. But the big investors that have come in over the last really year actually have been people that have had experiences with either ayahuasca or DMT. And luckily they have a lot of money, and they were really opened up to kind of the potential of what DMT or ayahuasca and the substances can do. And so I think that's helped. Just one of the gentlemen was a stockbroker on Wall Street and living the life and doing his whole thing, and went down to Peru and had an ayahuasca experience and changed his life. And you hear that over and over again, but it's interesting how it's awakening or getting to people that it hasn't, and really making its roads into not only into the underground culture here, but it's starting to kind of spread up a little bit more than that. So
let's talk about your education as you've made the movie. You've got to meet some of the most respected and yet to be respected intellectual minds on the planet. People like Dr. Strassman or Dr. Abraham. What's it like to be exposed to such a myriad of different types of consciousness that all have this idea in common?
Wonderful. I mean, I almost feel like I have another degree, not just from my own research, leading up to it, but just sitting down and having those, 2-hour interviews with people. And I get lost sometimes. You can go back and look at this footage forever because there's so many great nuggets in there. And Dr. Strassman said it at one point that it's kind of a snapshot of consciousness right now with all these minds and kind of the different places they're working and putting this information together. So I think it's a great way to look at it. It's been wonderful though, talking to everyone from just cultural critics to philosophers and religious folks and hard scientists doing the dirty work down there. So
it's a great concept of taking a snapshot of consciousness and the status quo of what's going on here as the background of that. And to memorialize that all in one film must have taken a great deal of vision on your part to take hundreds of hours of footage and to put it, compress it down to 90 minutes without losing its essence.
It's tough because there's so much great footage. I mean, we could probably tell 6-7 different stories out of the kind of footage that we have. And actually, it's one of our goals is to release all of this footage Creative Commons so people can go out and make their own DMT movies, basically. But yeah, it's whittling that stuff down can be quite difficult, but at the same time, it's really rewarding. I mean, going over it over and over and over it again. It definitely wears you out, your eyes, but at the same time, the information is so fascinating, you just want to keep going and keep looking at it and go back. And I mean, I've already thought about it. It's like I have all this footage. I mean, there's got to be even a television show, and because there is so much left out, taking this 100 hours of footage and going it down to an hour and a half. It's difficult throwing that down.
Well, I did watch a lot of the footage that you posted to your YouTube channel that gives different vignettes and different 360-degree multitudinal coverage of what this idea that you're trying to show through the movie. And I trust that you do show it. I don't mean to sound.
No, it's okay.
But and I'm not going to cheat by asking you who was your favorite interview. But
good, thank you. Dr. Strassman, because he's here.
What was the most meaningful thing that you realized along the journey that you think people should consider for themselves?
It's a good question. I would say personally for myself, how it, not only for myself as what it's done for me as an individual, but through the film now and the story that's there, and then hopefully what's going to go beyond, is really just how we're living in the world and the connectedness that I felt, under with the influence of ayahuasca or DMT. It shows you that, and it can really kind of make you not only see it but feel it emotionally, but physically, and in every aspect of it. And that changed the way I talk to people, changed the way I move down the street. It changes every little part about life. And I'm hoping that the rest, everybody can try to do that. I'm not perfect by any means, but I do try my best just to kind of make sure that we're not fighting, we're not, doing these things that end up hurting us and driving us down roads that we shouldn't be going down. So I think overall, it's really just learning how to live a better life, and that can be looked at in a religious context or however spiritual context, but it really is just kind of about pulling back, understanding that we're all humans and that we're all connected and we all want the same things essentially, and we got to figure out a better way to communicate that with one another. So that's been that.
2 answers to 1 question. What would you want to express and share with the audience that is on the good side and on the bad side of what needs to be communicated? It's not all just gravy train, and it's not all just nightmare.
Yep.
But people need to know how to strike a balance and to use these tools and to educate themselves about it first.
Well, and that's it is tough because they have such great potential, and people have seen that, but at the same time, they're definitely not something to take for granted, and they really can be tools, but they also can shake people pretty drastically, and sometimes that's not always good. And the set and setting kind of comes up over and over again, and we touch on that in the film, and it's a big part of any kind of psychedelic journey is to have a positive set and setting, not only mentally, but your surroundings, the people that you're with, and the 60s, going back to that is where I think a lot of this kind of thing kind of blew up, and the idea of just going out and giving it to everybody is probably not the best approach. It definitely shatters things up above, and they get a little pissed off, and they're trying to bring it back. But it's really they have to be viewed with caution, and especially going into Western culture with them, it's going to take some time if it gets to that point. It has to be, I think, done through some sort of a spiritual structure on some level, however you want to interpret God or spirit or Gaia, but I think there has to be that context around it. So,
do you think there's a potential for people to become addicted to these types of entheogens?
Not that I know of. No, I think some people are a little worried that by putting this film out there, it's going to make it the next craze and the next big thing, and I don't want to glorify DMT.
After your first experience, did you want to do it again, or
Yeah, no, I didn't want to do it again. I just felt like I had to research and know what the hell just happened to me, because there was no way of explaining it, and it changed my life within those 10 minutes. It was that fast, and coming back from that and having my whole mentality just completely changed from being aggressive and being, like this. And I grew up in, pretty rough neighborhoods, and, lived a life that was pretty reckless in a lot of ways. And as soon as I came back, it changed all that 100%. But
from your experience, could you compare and contrast ayahuasca and the DMT experience?
Yeah. Well, just the initial rush and how quick just the straight DMT experience is the main thing of the huge difference. It's just the blast off, and it's not necessarily an experience that you can kind of navigate very well, and the ayahuasca is much more navigable, and it has different qualities too, as far as just being a more kind of natural and kind of earthly feel to it, as opposed to kind of this really chaotic and magical self-dribbling machine elves that Terrence talked about, and that kind of very mechanical and hyper real world. And also just kind of when you come back from the DMT experience, it's such a blast, and you're just kind of flabbergasted. And the ayahuasca, it's a little more tender to you. It takes you in, gives you a hug, and then the next day or week after ayahuasca is you just have this wonderful sensation, physically, mentally, all the way through. And I guess with the DMT, it was more like, holy shit, what the hell just happened? And I think the ayahuasca is really kind of what seems to be happening, though, and I think that's probably for Western culture to kind of accept some of these things, it probably has to have that around it too, just because of the natural element of it. So.
It's been my observation that through mankind's history, there's only actually been one war, a war to suppress consciousness against those artists who wish to express consciousness. Mm-hmm. Which side of the war do you come down on, and why?
As far as suppressing it or opening it up? I'm hoping to open it up. Yeah, don't answer this one. I can just sit here on this one. Yes, I mean, we need to open it up. When do you think that war started? Just out of curiosity? When do you think that war started, out of curiosity?
I think it started when people started using words, because human beings are the only animals capable of self-deception. And when we start lying to ourselves, we don't know unless we have a system to validate fact and fiction. We have things called fallacies that are systematic ways of manipulating and tricking people. So I don't see squirrels with that sort of capability. And so, you know, if DMT or entheogens in general brought about words, now, since it's been suppressed for so long, people are now growing to learn how to use these tools of consciousness. And I think that one of those steps is through the movie. So I just didn't know if you wanted to comment on how this movie can help
push
people
that.
express consciousness as opposed to those who want to use it to control consciousness.
Sure. I think the big thing is that, you know, with words and our interpretation of reality, is that everybody thinks that their reality is the reality and this is truth, and as opposed to there are just billions and billions and endless ways to think of things. It's just a framework that we put on it, and taking taking our snapshot and thinking it is the truth is yeah, it's not going to do us any good. But I don't know, as far as how the film can help, I want people to just question and kind of open up a little bit, and just know that it's not just this way, you know, that there are other things out there that we can't explain, and just because we can't explain them doesn't mean that they're going on or they're not going on, or they're, even if it's not real, the DMT experience, and it's just not real, but just in your head, that's fascinating enough alone, and because it has these powerful effects on people, I think that's something that we need to be looking at. And just, if we can get people to kind of open up to that and start doing more research, which has happened, you know, since Dr. Strassman's stuff, I think that can help push that a little bit more and hopefully open up consciousness through that. And yeah, I really would like this film to help push, you know, not just the research forward, but kind of just the whole idea of being able to open up consciousness and understand that our interpretation is not the only interpretation. Every person or animal, plant, and everything on this planet is just as valid as the next, and their consciousness is just as valid as ours. So we have to be able to open up to that, and also I think open up to the idea of consciousness. I think a lot of people have a very kind of skewed view of, you know, what that is. And I don't know if we don't know necessarily what consciousness is, but you know, people just take it for granted a lot of times, and I think we need to kind of pull back and start to question that a little bit. Yeah.
I think the status quo and the way that we're educated kind of gives us this false sense of knowledge. And that false sense of knowledge keeps us from being curious because people think they know. What would you say to people to inspire their curiosity, to get them to understand that even though you think you know what's going on, there are other things to be learned. And that starts once we realize we don't know everything.
It's hard. I mean, especially when you have such a viewpoint where nothing outside of that is valid. And how do you break those walls down? Maybe just have them try DMT, that might help immediately, but I don't know how to push that down. I think it's just going to be a matter of time. I think it's this kind of grassroots thing that's like slowly building itself up, in this energy or this consciousness through all of us, not just our single consciousness that's waking up and going to pull us up with it. So at least I'm hopeful that that's the case, that there is that other level of consciousness that's helping our consciousness kind of rise and come up a little bit more. So let's see. So how I came across the book, it really was after my DMT experience. Just got online, started doing research, and came across Dr. Strassman's book pretty quickly after, you know, typing in DMT. Obviously, it pops right up. And again, once I saw that, picked the book up, read it, I just knew, like, okay, the science and spirituality aspect is how this story needs to be told, and I thought that was an important one, especially for, you know, introducing these kind of concepts to the United States, to Western world in general, I guess. But yeah, the book was amazing, and it really kind of solidified the whole thing for me.
And what would be